Welcome to our 3 p.m. session, Tools, Strategies, and Best Practices for Strategic Visioning and Planning. My name is Lisa Holland Wang. I come from Portland, Oregon, Oregon Judicial Department. Our presenters today are come to us from the Third Circuit Court of Michigan. We have Zanelle Brown and Richard Lynch. I'd like to welcome the people joining us online today. Now I will hand it off to our speakers. Join me in welcoming Zanelle and Richard.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was very excited when Zanelle told me that we were going to be presenting at NACM and we were going to do a core presentation. So this is going to be a really interactive activity. So we're going to begin. I need everyone to get up. We're going to do a plank. I need everyone to hold it for the first 15 minutes as we begin this process. So the core needs to be engaged for this presentation. So everyone on board, just get a moment, make sure there's a whole room. Okay, well, maybe that won't work so well. Let's try this instead. How many of you are in organizations that have existing strategic plans? Okay, so a fair number of you. And how many of you are actively implementing those strategic plans? Okay, so good. Fair number of those who have them. And 2 people have already been exposed to this, but I woke up this morning either thinking about or dreading the moment that I was going to get up here and thinking, what the heck am I going to talk about today? And what about strategic planning? And then, for reasons which I cannot understand, an old poem, Ozymandias, came to mind. And 2 people I had breakfast with, they already heard the story, but I thought about the last portion of the poem, and it says, "Look at my works, ye mighty, in despair. Nothing beside remains. Around the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." I thought about that in the context of all too often, you go through all the work to develop a strategic plan. You engage people. You create this edifice. And then it sits on a shelf collecting dust. Well, like the decaying edifice in Ozymandias, there are a few things more depressing than engaging in that much activity to essentially have it go to waste. And staff, all those people who participated in the project, they look at it and say, well, this is about the dumbest waste of time we ever engaged in. Why did I engage? Why did I give of myself to participate in this? Just to have nothing happen. So if you ever were to engage in a strategic plan again, the level of engagement diminishes rapidly. And the trust that you hope to develop and to engage people to get this thing moving forward, to improve your institution, it trickles down. And now you're out there in the desert and you're going, gosh, why doesn't anyone care? Why doesn't anyone want to improve this institution? We're trying to do something. But folks are just looking at it going, gosh, this just really isn't worth my time. So one of the big things, and it was great to see the show of hands here of those people who have strategic plans, that they have those and they're being implemented. And we began this process back in 2015. A brilliant woman to my left approached our chief judge and said, you know, we've talked about a lot of things and we have these concepts, but we're really not doing anything. We have something going here, something going there. Or comparing it to me, which hopefully won't become too apparent during the course of this conversation, well, I can be all over the place. And sometimes your efforts, if you don't have a strategic plan, they are all over the place. You're looking at the next shiny object, the next great thing. Or wishing for the next pandemic to come to encourage some other great change in your organization. But 2015, Zanelle reached out to our chief judge and said, we need to do something like this. And why don't you give us some guidance as to what happened?
So I was really interested in doing a strategic plan because I was a new court administrator and I had gone through 1 year without one. And like Rich pointed out, your energy can just be scattered. Whatever the new shiny thing is you're told to chase. And I also had vacancies for people who reported under me. So the strategic planning was a way for us to ensure that we knew where we were going. People knew what their role was, and then we could align with the staff, and we had a vision. And as a court, I think if you're doing something as big as justice, you want to make sure that you have a vision. Today, our whole purpose here is to gauge you in the conversation. We're going to share what we learned, what we think some of the best practices are. If you're aspiring to have a strategic plan, if those who, again, if you can put your hands up if you got one and you're using it, so somebody can come sit next to you so they can start picking your brain and you can start sharing the conversation as well. What's really important about strategic planning is that it gives you the opportunity to look at what's the responsibility of your organization, put that down in writing, and communicate it to everyone who's a part of your organization. It allows you to be consistent and you have a way to measure what you're out to do. So you're not doing, let's chase this grant, let's chase that grant, and then you have all this money, you don't have any idea what you're doing with all the money, and then you end up having to give it back. And it also makes sure that those who are sitting in the seats so far from the court administrator, so far from the chief judge, they know what the organization is about too. So that's why strategic planning was important to us. Today, we're going to look at what in the core materials regarding strategic planning and talk about the process. And we want to engage you in the concept and the conversation about the process. Some of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did with the strategic plan is that when we put it out there, the outsiders understood what our court was about and what our court was trying to obtain. Very helpful when we started talking to our funding unit. We wanted to make sure that we had a vision there, that everybody who worked for us, the community that we were trying to serve, the stakeholders and the partnerships knew what the vision was. And they would be energized. Hey, Third Circuit Court is really doing something. It's not this old building, well, we were old building, that, was just breaking down and crumbling. We really believed in justice and making sure that there was access to justice. And we also gave our management team, by having that strategic plan, these are the actions that you're taking, and this is the why behind them. So they weren't sitting there like 2-year-old toddlers, well, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to do this? We had a plan there that aligned what we were doing with the why we were doing it and where they would play the parts. It's also an opportunity to be very future-minded, unless a pandemic occurs. But it gives you an opportunity to think not only what you're doing today, but what you need to do 5 years out, so you know how to save certain resources or what's your timing and to put things out there. It gave us an opportunity to identify our priorities, communicate our priorities, and to let everyone know this is what we were up to, this is what you can hold us responsible to, this is how we see ourselves interacting with others. So like I said, we're going to talk about the process that they use in the core materials. It's like 9 different steps talking about the strategic plan. And we want to engage you. We want to know what lessons have you learned? What things have you experienced? And what are some of the best practices? Because the way that we did it may not be the way that everyone needs to do it. We're a large urban court. We've been in existence since 1830, whatever. And there were a lot of things that we really needed to turn over and to take a look at. So here are the 9 steps. 1 is to initiate and agree on a process. Number 2 is to define the court mission. Number 3, develop the vision of the future. 4, conduct the trends analysis and look at various scenarios at that. Look at the organizational assessment and find out, where your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats are. To identify the strategic issues and key result areas you want to impact, to develop the comprehensive strategies, and then to put the plan, like Rich says, we're not creating this for the sake of having this great book to put on the shelf, but how do we actually put the plan into action? And then finally, how do we monitor, evaluate, and update that plan? So Rich, I'm going to give you step number 1, lead the discussion.
Well, first of all, I'm going to try to stay seated for a little bit because you may remember Paul's presentation at the plenary on the first day, and he was talking how He may be of cultural heritage of being a curmudgeon or an Eeyore. For better or worse, I'm on the opposite side of the equation. I'm more in the Tigger category, so if I start walking around, some of you walked in, saw me just pacing back and forth and engaging and what have you, well, there's a decent shot some of you will get seasick before this is all over. And I didn't get my run in yet, so it's a double reason. I'm going to try to stay planted, but we'll see how well that works. So that's the first thing. And now I'm going to make a shameless plug. For those of you who are not NACM members, if you saw the previous slide, and a lot of these slides, I believe all of them, are taken from a NACM tool on strategic planning. And this and other tools like it highlight the value of NACM membership by providing useful tools that provide guidance to you on how to improve your court and your operations. So register early, register often, become members. That ends this commercial interlude. So, whether and how to plan. I don't know about the courts that you're in. As Nell indicated, we're in a large court. We have 58 judges, 20-something referees. We are spread over 4 different campuses. So every now and again, I have to take my feet off my desk, pick up the phone, and answer a call because something has happened. I find this to be terribly disruptive because I'm like the Maytag repairman. I just get to sit back eating bonbons all day and just pondering questions like how many angels can sit on the head of a pin. Because very little happens in our court. Put another way, you, like Zanel and I, are probably caught up in the fact that your day-to-day existence deals with an awful lot of different tactical issues. What is happening? What fire to put out? How am I going to address this? We had a couple of COVID issues today in our jury office that we were able to work with via those delightful smartphones. And we had a number of other things going on. We have a funding question that's going on with our funding unit. So you're always going one problem to the next, and you're going this, that, and the other thing. What's the next shiny thing? And as you do that, 1, it becomes very tiresome. 2, it prevents you from spending time looking at the long-term vision of why you exist, what purpose you try to fulfill as you exist, and how you're going to fulfill that mission. So by taking time, carving it out, highlighting the fact that this is a critical and important detail in the operation of your institution, you place your values there and you begin the effort. And that's the first step in the process that will lead to an implemented strategic plan. But that's the key thing. You want to look at who, what, where, how, why are we as a court? What do we do? Some of you have already had the gross misfortune of being in other sessions with me, so you've heard me blather about various things. And one of the things some of you may have heard is I refer to the courts as a monopoly. If you want justice, you get to come to a court. Yeah, there's ADR functions out there. You can go to a mediator, what have you. However, other than self-help or street justice, I don't know if there is a violation of the criminal law. How are you going to go out there and resolve that other than through the courts? Or if you want to get a divorce, you don't just make the declaration, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and it's all over with. I mean, at times you think that if some of these things happen, it could make life a little bit easier. We wouldn't have people fighting it out and spending entirely too much on attorneys who are throwing fat on the fire. However, it's not the way we work. We have this monopoly and we have to do it. And all these cases come in with people in different stages, be those the attorneys, the litigants, the witnesses, or the court staff, as they try to address these things. And how do they do this? What is the culture in which they come? Are people who are coming to the court valued as people who are utilizing this monopolized service? Or, oh gosh, I have another self-represented litigant. Or to express one of my explicit biases, oh no, it's a sovereign. How am I going to handle this? I can't even talk to this person. We don't even share the same language on concepts. So I'm just not up for this today. Just tell them to come back. I'm not available. Well, let's be honest. That doesn't address the issue, and it speaks to what kind of culture you have and how you're going to implement, again, that monopoly. So you have to look at that and see what you're going to do. How is access provided? Then you have, what is your capacity to handle things? I mean, it's nice that all these cases keep coming in and, well, you can see the cases going out now. We're starting to do jury trials again. We have some bench trials going on. We're getting motions resolved. It's kind of an exciting time. However, you look at those cases that we had limited operations for 2 years. How are those going to get resolved? So what kind of capacity do you have? And what is the view that people have of the institution? How are they going to go forward on this? So identify those issues and see what you have and where people want to go. So if you ask questions like whether you should engage in or whether you need strategic planning, I think you already know the answer because you're already asking that question. You're doing the self-examination. It's just what that's going to look like as you go forward. So the question becomes, how do you put that into play? And I'll toss out a couple of thoughts. I doubt that these are unique to the court that we work in, but issues like funding, 3 branches of government, remote and hybrid work schedules, employee retention, remote hearings, the use of contractual workers, self-represented litigants, limited English proficient litigants, fines, fees, costs, and how are those addressed within your institution, case establishment, incarceration, and how to use incarceration, docket congestion. My guess is everyone here has some variant of those types of issues in their organization. And how do you address those things? And how are you going to get your team to work on these issues to develop a plan where you can address these in a meaningful capacity as opposed to just chasing after the next shiny thing going, yeah, tell that person I'm not available today. He can come back tomorrow. So as you go forward, you can outline these things, get an idea of what's going on, and then you can start working on the process.
So before we get to our next step, which is like defining the court's mission, for those of you who are considering embarking upon the strategic planning process, what are some of the things, like Rich mentioned, that are standing out for you? Why would you want to do this? What are some of the things that are holding you back regarding readiness even?
The holding back would probably be time is a factor that everybody would say.
Wow. What is that sound?
As far as time,
for
our
one-
process,
okay.
our planning process probably even took 6 months. So you're right, it is a carving out of time.
I can run away.
Other thoughts?
Okay.
If you're considering doing a strategic plan, what are some of the questions you're asking yourself if you're ready or not?
You want to know what the leadership environment is like, how long the process may take, and over the lifetime of a particular plan, how that leadership might change, whether it be a retirement of a key judge or other figure. All of that can play a role in the success of not only the creation of the plan, but the ultimate implementation.
Correct. For us, I was a brand new court administrator. We had a brand new chief judge. We were like trying to put it all together. And so our timing was good. But we also realized that what we were creating was going to be there after we even left. And the first strategic plan continued after we changed chief judges. We're now at the point where we need to start revising and create another strategic plan with even more initiatives. How about someone else? What did you look at, and what challenges did you have, and how did you finally say now's the time? Someone who has a plan in place.
Thank you. Getting everybody to see the same vision. It's very difficult for maybe those who work day-to-day job to see the overall vision where the organization should be. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, depending on how long you want your strategic planning to go. I notice some organizations do it every year, but I feel yearly is very limited time. You know, the year passes by and you really did not catch up on the things you needed to do. But getting everybody on board with the same vision, that's a little bit challenging and requires a lot of work. Thank you.
The way that our court is structured, we have our chief judge, then our chief judge has like an executive team, which is a mixture of judges and administrators. So that's where we started with the buy-in. Let's talk to the exec team and the administrators, get them to buy into it. And then once they bought into it, they were like, okay, let's move it forward. And I don't know if all of you experience this, but for me in Michigan, when I come to NACOM, you guys act like I'm a big thing. In Michigan, I'm like this. So we had to bring somebody outside of the court, outside from Michigan, to come and say, yeah, this is, you know, this is cool and this is what you need to do. And then people really started to listen and pick up on that as well. So when you're thinking about the strategic planning, you're right, it is an investment of time. It is something that probably, if you're on the ground putting it together, you may not see all the various versions that'll come about and be there for the implementation. And you pointed out that maybe doing a one-year strategic plan is not the way to go. So we did a multiple year. We did I believe it was 3 to 5 years. And then each year we had different projects and we get together to talk about what's the project for this year. So again, it's long and then it's short. So you get to see both. The second part of the strategic plan, the second process is to define the court's mission. For us, that took the judges getting into the room, that took, what is the state court administrator looking at for us to do? How are we being measured in the job that we do? And then we determined our mission was to resolve disputes timely and in a customer service fashion. What are other missions that you've seen for your courts? Anyone who has a plan in place, what are the mission statements that you have there? And even if you don't have a mission statement, why does your court exist?
One part that we factored in was access to justice, because I now work for Orange County, but I previously worked for San Bernardino County in California. It's the largest county in the whole United States. And so there was a huge access issue. We had courts that there would be a 2.5-hour travel time from one court to the next court. So access to justice was really big, and there was a lot of focus on how to lessen the burden of accessing the court to the public.
Mm-hmm. Other missions.
It's, sorry, I can't remember exactly, but the fair and timely resolution of cases and in a partial manner that instills the public trust and confidence.
Oh, I like that.
So we kind of lumped it all in together, but
I like
that was
that
ours.
one. When you get to this point where you've decided that you're going to do a strategic plan and you're looking for a mission, go search and look and see what other courts got. You do not need to start from scratch. You do not need to, build it as if it's something new. And you can present it, and then you'll have fun getting everybody in the room together to wordsmith it. Well, you got to include this and you got to include that. So a lot of conversation will come down there. And you don't have to become bogged down in trying to perfect the mission statement. Step 3.
The big thing to remember is the fact that this is a journey, not a destination. It's similar to things like D&I. You're not ever going to get to that final point. So you're going to be working through this all throughout the time that you're working with the court. So accept that going in. And if you do that, it makes the process a whole lot easier. You might have individual projects and you set a time date, deadline. We're getting this done by next year. We're getting this done by the 30th of next month, what have you. That's great because it gives you clear, objective goals. People can see the progress that's occurring within the organization. But if you think that, we're going to perfect our institution in 3 notes, well, My guess is you've just set yourself up for failure. It's never going to happen. So keep that in mind. And the other thing is, you want to have clearly defined goals as you go forward. Not in the mission statement, because that's a very broad statement. It's talking what we represent. But as you get those goals, you want to get down there. So you're drilling down through that vision to other things. So that's important, and you have to have people together, because you're going to have some people, they're big picture people. They think of all these grand ideas. And then you have very small, discrete. How is this going to happen within my department? What does this mean in my universe? Or, to quote one of my favorite philosophers of all time, the old lady on the Hallmark shoebox cards. I forget what the heck her name is. Change is fine, so long as I don't have to do anything differently. You're going to have those folks out there. So as you're identifying those vision issues, how is this going to come into play, and how are you going to buy people in to get this going? And when you think about these things, there's a certain mentality out there. Go big or go home. Well, as you do that vision, go big. Don't be afraid of it. But as someone told me when I arrived in Third Circuit, just remember what it takes to eat an elephant. You're doing it one bite at a time. You're not swallowing that sucker all at once. So, sage guidance. Because if you try to do that, it's going to be a little more challenging. You're not going to accomplish that entire vision in one big swoop. And let's see. I knew I was going to end up failing on my mission to sit still. And what does your court stand for? How are you going to tell people what your court stands for? What you don't want is you put that vision statement together, and I hope I don't offend anyone with this, is tapioca pudding. I hate tapioca pudding. It is not worth the effort to me to ingest tapioca pudding. It's like, why is this here? Did someone have wallpapering to do and you just gave it to me for a side? I don't get it. Give me something with flavor, something with texture. I want something of substance. Well, kind of like that with that vision statement. What is the substance you're telling your community, your stakeholders, both internally and externally, as you go forward? Who am I? Why should you believe in me? Some of you may not have noticed, but there are some folks out there who seem to have, how should I best phrase this? A certain level of institutional distrust. I kind of laugh about this as I think about it because I'm old enough to remember, gosh, when I was a kid in the 60s we had this. Dang, it's back again. They've redone all the TV shows, they're redoing the same music. Okay, I'm getting a little tired of these reruns here. I could have lived without the social disruption from my childhood. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully something good will come out of this as well. But you want that vision statement to be of that substance so people can believe in you both internally and externally, and you can go out there and give them something to believe in.
So your vision statement is usually aspirational as well as inspirational. So it pulls at that heartstring. What are some of the vision statements that you have, or what things do you think would make a good vision statement and should be included in a vision statement?
Oh, sure.
Ideas.
We need help. We're going to the Statue of Liberty play. Got two people, yay. Okay.
So something with innovations. How would you frame that in your most poetic way?
I would say maybe like something to the effect of improving the view of the public of the court system by implementing innovative strategies or implemented innovative technologies to create like efficient judicial processing or something along that line.
And what's your court's name?
I'm sorry?
What court do you work for?
I work for Orange County Court.
So Orange County Court is innovative. We make sure that there's access to justice. We use creativity to deliver our services. So something like that.
Yes.
Where when a person gets your annual report, they're like, yeah, I want to work from there. Or yeah, that's the type of services that I receive.
I was going to say, since she's already answered that question, I just wanted to just make a general statement about strategic plans, having had an opportunity to put together a number of them, some of which have sat on the shelf and collected dust in other lifetimes,
That's
other
a
jobs.
good lesson learned.
But
Please.
what I have found that the best way to put plans like this together and really bring them to life is, especially for your staff that's doing all the day-to-day work, is to make sure that they can see something that's a result within the first 3 to 6 months. It can't be a year off. It's got to be real quick, something that they can see, and then they'll have more buy-in. It's easy for upper management to be able to look and visualize where we want this organization to be 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. But for the people that are out there dealing with the customers and dealing with the junk day to day, they're like, they don't get it. That's what I've found that they think. But if you can show them that you understand and feel what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and that you're trying to put a plan together that addresses their immediate needs, then there's more buy-in.
Buy-in. So when you're looking at the vision, it's this big, lofty type of place of where we want to go. But you're absolutely right. If I don't have something that trickles down to something that's very tangible for that person who's on the front line, where they can realize it 3 months, 6 months after we say that we have a plan, we're going to lose them. So there has to be that alignment. There has to be that operational, I don't know if I said that right, operation of the actual plan, right? So the vision is important.
That's why in our vision statement, Zanel put it together, and it begins, in Detroit, Michigan, a stately courthouse did decree.
Not quite.
You said be poetic.
Then you come to the point where you're actually developing and looking at the data. So you're going to see what does your future look like? You're planning for your future. And there are a number of different ways to plan for the future. I'm going to just talk about the P ones that are listed there. When you're looking out of your lens into the future, you can say, hey, guess what? If we keep doing things the way that we've always been doing it, what do you get? What you've always gotten, insanity, right? And that's the probable future. We know that this is what we can expect if we keep doing things. We can also look in the realm of reality and say that, well, it's probably, if we change A, B, and C, and we probably can do that, and it's realistic we can do that, we end up with our plausible future. There's data to support it. You do this, A plus B equals C, you'll get there. You have an idea when you'll get there. Then there's some other things, well, we really don't know about this, but if this happens, something else could occur, and then our future could look like something different. So it's possible. But when you're looking and you're thinking about the vision and you're thinking about what you do as a court, you really want to focus on what's preferred. You want to determine what do you want your court to look like. So I'm going to ask that you take a moment and talk to the people around you. Groups of 3s, groups of 4s, talk to somebody before you or after you, and tell that person, in the next 5 years, what do you want your court to look like? Okay? Go ahead, turn around and have a conversation. So who wants to share what's the preferred future for their court?
I have one in the chat if you want me to share that one.
Please.
To start with. This is from one of the participants watching us virtually. One of our main visions is to support our mission of access to justice is to become a paperless court. Additional self-held services, e-filing expansion, and what steps we would need to take to move us fully there.
Okay, so somebody wants to become paperless. Is that other courts' preferred visions? Okay. So when you're looking at that preferred vision, you also got to consider what's some of the strengths that'll help get you there. So what would be some of the strengths if you were looking to become paperless that can help get you there?
A bonfire is not an option. Kindling, yes, not a bonfire.
Aren't there like some grants out there possibly to help you do that? Is there an opportunity to show to your funding agency, if you do that, where there's some other cost savings are? Now I get it, right? But what are some of the weaknesses? When you're thinking about, that's my preferred future, but what's some of my weaknesses? Staffing and resources to get the project done. It's time consuming.
The magic print button. As you make this transition, the inherent tendency, print.
We like paper, the culture. So when you're thinking of your preferred future, you got to keep that in mind too, because you're going to have to figure out how you're either going to leverage your strengths, overcome your weaknesses, and when opportunities come, take advantage of them. What's someone else's? What's your preferred vision for your Corps? There was a lot of discussion. I heard it. Go ahead.
Notice she's paperless.
We acknowledge, encourage, reflect, and connect with the ever-changing face of our community. We provide new avenues to improve access to the court. Case resolution. We support the independent constitutional role of the judiciary by managing non-judicial court functions and supporting resources, allowing the judges to focus on the advancement of cases to resolution.
Okay. And so what's some of the strengths and weaknesses that you've encountered?
Well, I know that we have a terrible case backlog since COVID.
So COVID was definitely a threat to your doing that, okay.
We also have one of the area's finest benches, and we have more cases than other circuits in our state filed in our court. So that lends itself to a little bit of the backlog as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. One last person, your preferred vision for your court, your preferred future that you want to create for your court. Be bold, be brave, come on. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Well, briefly, my vision is that the judges are all united in moving towards a common goal. We have several new judges. They're trying to go off in different directions, different priorities, different passions. And I think if we had a plan like this that might corral them, I don't want to say corral them, it might encourage them to work within a framework to see where their passion fits to what we're trying to do. So that would be my goal.
Okay, so your preferred future is that everybody's aligned and we're moving towards mutual goals for the organization, not necessarily independent, egotistical type things.
Well said.
So what's your weaknesses on that one?
Well, we've got, new judges that are coming in with constituencies behind them, with their own priorities, their own dockets, which are very different. So competing interests are our weaknesses.
Yes, yes. So step number 4, when you're looking at the data, the trends, and then you're doing the analysis, then you say, okay, all of this is going on. And after I've looked at all of that, how do I determine what I want our future to be? What's the preferred future? That's where you really want to focus at. As people have pointed out, it's probably going to be time and resource intensive. You're probably not going to have smooth sailing. If you were going to have smooth sailing, you wouldn't need a plan. You just jump in your car and get there, right? So that's what step number 4 is. Is there anything else from the online chat? Not right now. Okay, so let's go to step number 5, which is organizational assessment.
So with step number 5, you want to gather your data and begin reviewing it. And this can be uncomfortable. One, because of the volume of data that you have. Courts gather incredible amounts of information. It may not always come in a neat box that has a cute bow on it that makes it really easy to access or to assess. However, you have a ton of data. And how to evaluate that becomes one of your challenges. But in doing this, you get to better know the organization. And what do I mean by data? This can be almost anything under the sun. It can be, what's your budget? What is your staffing? How many vacancies do you have? What's your turnover rate? How many people do you have that are approaching retirement age? How is your compensation package compared to other employers within the area? Are you considered to be an attractive employer? Or you can look at docket sizes. How many cases are being filed? Is that number trending upwards or downwards? Do you have sufficient judicial resources to address this? Are cases being tried? How long does take a case to get to trial? Do people like going to trial before the judges, or does this seem to be some kind of punishment? That, oh no, if I have a case before such and such, I'm going somewhere else. How does ADR fall into that equation? If you have multiple types of cases on your docket, how do those intersect? Do judges have multiple dockets, or are they in one single division? That is, you have a civil division, a domestic relations division, a criminal division, a family division, a probate division. How does that all work out, and what's the overlap? Do you coordinate between the courts? How does that work? How do you handle things like weekend or holiday arraignments? What is the viewpoint, and how is incarceration used within your community? How do you handle limited English proficient residents or other court users? What's the level of trust that one comes to your court and they can have their issue addressed? Or is there a fear factor in coming to the court? So you have all these different things. I'm sure all of you can think of tons of other ideas that I haven't mentioned that come into play that you probably have data on, that if you take the time to assess, you can start identifying trends. Gosh, I noticed that during the pandemic, our divorce rate plummeted. However, since we've reached endemic stage, golly, it seems like we have an awful lot of unhappy people because that number is skyrocketing and they want their stuff handled now. Or, going back to a different type of trend analysis, what type of relationship do you have with either foreclosures or evictions and the creation of child protective proceedings? Is there a correlation there, or these operate independently of each other? And how do you address those things? Because if you can address the one, does that mean you can address the other just by collateral issues? And you can limit the number of people coming into your court on a protective proceeding because the parents are not homeless at that point in time. So you look at things like that, and how does that all come into play? So you want to analyze these things and see how it works. You want to interact with your stakeholders, both internally and externally. Because let's say you have a backlog on your criminal docket and your jail is bursting at the seams. However, your prosecutor's office budget or district attorney's budget has been slashed and they have insufficient experienced prosecutors or district attorneys to try those cases. Or you don't have adequate defense attorneys to represent these individuals. How does that come into play? So again, you have lots of different areas where you can gather data to begin your analysis of what is going on and what your needs are within your organization. And as you look at these, you're probably going to stumble across a lot of ideas, and then you have to do the drill down. And this is where it comes in handy, not only talking to your internal and external stakeholders, but going down, and as was indicated earlier, talking to that line staff. How the heck do they feel when they have a line coming from here to infinity? And each day they experience this. Or they have people coming in, they're trying to file paperwork, but because access to justice is sometimes financially prohibited, how are they going to manage to do that? Well, they come here, they're asking questions, and they get the delightful response, I'm sorry, I can't give you legal advice. I didn't ask for legal advice. All I want to do is file this stupid piece of paper. I'm sorry, I can't tell you that you didn't have this signed, so I can't accept it, because that would be legal advice. So you want to get this type of information in, because we're trying to make the courts more accessible, not less accessible. But you want to find out what's going on with these types of trends and get that type of information out there. So what are your strengths? Do people believe in your court? I mean, kind of like the dentist, I doubt that anyone looks forward to, gosh, I'm going to court today. Yeah! It's been a while since I've been sued or I had to go for a child support hearing. Man, this is a good day in my life. Well, if that's happening in your court, you're doing something we surely aren't, because in 33 years, I haven't seen anyone quite that excited to go to court. However, you get the idea. It's not that Eeyore dread of going, oh no, I'm going to court, the judge is going to threaten to lock me up again. Oh no, he's never going to listen to me. Oh no, this is just a waste of my time. My attorney's going to bleed me dry again. Well, let's be honest. We've seen people come into court with that delightful attitude, and oftentimes there's a basis in some respect for how they develop that attitude. It may be anecdotal, it may be self-perception, it may not be entirely accurate. However, it exists out there. So you want to identify what those trends are, find out where those strengths and weaknesses are, and how the heck you can do something with this information. Because I'm of a certain age that one of those delightful possessions that my family had when I was young was a bright, shiny set of encyclopedias. For those of you who are much younger than I am, encyclopedias are something you used before Google. And he had all these books. It would take up a whole bookshelf. If you got the fancy schmancy kind, you can even get supplements and have them updated each year. I'm envious. We were not in that group. We didn't get that. However, you'd go through and you'd have to find out what's going on. And you'd look at that and go, gosh, where are we going to go with this? But you get the idea. You need that type of information, but you don't want those encyclopedias to sit on that bookshelf, gathering that dust. So now, like good old Ozymandias, they're covered in the sands of time. And no one has ever broken the spine of one of those books and gathered any of the information out there. You don't want your data to be there, because if you do, then your strategic plan isn't going to have value because you didn't use any of the tools that you had available to you. So you have to look at that. And now, in honor of my little quadrant of leaders up here, we have another shameless plug for membership. You'll notice a reference to court tools, also available on the NACM website. If you get your membership, you can use that now. You can use it going forward. But it's actually a useful tool. You look at these things and you look at some of the slides like we're using on this presentation, they prevent you from having to reinvent the wheel. Because, as I said earlier on, I don't know about some of you, as I sit up there on my desk, my feet kicked up, sometimes my shoes off because I haven't done anything all day other than eat bonbons and stared out. I overlook the Detroit River, so I get to see ship traffic going through the Great Lakes. So I ponder where those ships may have gone that day, because life is pretty darn boring in my world. Because with 58 judges, the largest general jurisdiction trial court in Michigan, what could possibly happen to distract me from that pleasant view? But that's why we're going to use things like this, because you need to do that analysis, gather that data, and find out where the heck you're going so you can try to make your system more accessible, and that people within it want to participate in this, and those people using it know what's going on. And if you have the data, it gives you something measurable to talk to people about. Go, gosh, 3 years ago, it took us 115 days to get a case to trial. Now it's taking us 278 days. Now, we think part of this is because of a backlog. Part of it's because of COVID restrictions, we haven't fully gone back to having all of our judges and bringing all the jurors in that we used to do. And we have other limitations. But that number has continued to trend upwards since things have relatively stabilized. So we know that we have an issue out there. Where the heck are we going to go with this? And if you keep measuring part of that, and this could be one of those strategic plans that you have as a subpart for your strategic plan, it gives you something meaningful that you can work on and assess what's going on, as opposed to going, golly, I think we're taking on water here, sir. Was that an iceberg that we hit? Well, yes, says the captain of the RMS Titanic. I think that may have been an iceberg, but let's keep steaming on. We'll find out later. So get that information, use that information, and engage in that review so you can do something meaningful and data-driven as opposed to just throwing darts at a dartboard.
Okay, I think he's hammered the point home. You will have a lot of information. You will be gathering information locally. You'll be gathering information nationally. You'll be looking at trends. You'll have all that. And then you have to decide, because there's going to be so much stuff out there you're going to be looking at and analyzing. Then you're going to have to decide, whatever the decision-making body is. We had a strategic planning team, again, representative from that executive team, representative from staff, representative from administrators and managers. And they looked at all that stuff, and then they said, okay, these are the 5 big theme areas that we're going to concentrate on. These are the key areas that we really want to affect. So if you're a small court, what would some of those things look like? If you're trying to put a strategic plan in place for your small jurisdiction, what are some of those areas that you know you want to impact for the next 3 to 5 years? If you're sitting in the county clerk's office or the clerk's office, what are some of those issues? Who's willing to share on those?
I would say customer service overall, and to keep up with the trends that are happening outside of the courts as well. So to try to be as flexible and proactive to make it accessible to all.
Okay, so access, customer service, and that would probably go no matter where you're located. Those are going to be some of the other things. Over here.
Workforce management.
Workforce management. Under that, you're probably going to have something that deals with hybrid working, remote working, flex schedules. What other area? What's important for your organization 3 to 5 years out? Just broad titles. Who gets to decide what's important?
Statewide, we've certainly got concerns about access to justice, and you could look at that from many different dimensions: financial, linguistic, as well as ADA type of disability issues, where we have many courthouses that are 100 years old and they don't have the budgets at the local level to fix them. So what do? And then you have to deal with the state and the questions about the state budget. With everything that's going on, we may have been flush for a year or two, but are we facing a recession, and what could that mean?
So funding, yes. Any other issues? Any that haven't been mentioned yet? Any other broad themes? Succession planning, maybe under workforce? So you're going to look at all the data, all the information, whatever that strategic planning team is, they're going to get together and they're going to identify these huge areas. Then under the huge areas, you're going to identify smaller categories. Maybe they could be called your goals. Then underneath that, you're going to take from that, what's the project for the year? So something even more finite, something more tangible. That's when you get into what's the project that we're going to do at the customer service desk that's going to impact the customer service rep and the person who's coming in. So step 7, which is develop comprehensive strategies.
Well, I just want to say congratulations. You guys all did a really awesome job with that plank. But now your core is probably a little bit sore, so we're going to switch over. We're going to move to downward dog. Try to stretch those abs out a little bit because you probably have a little bit of a burn going. So like I said, we're working on that core. We're going to try to develop it. And hopefully you're going to be able to walk when you get out of here because, well, let's see. We've been going quite a while now. You've been doing a plank for about an hour. So you're going to feel us tomorrow. I apologize. So, another stupid joke from this guy. And there's another one coming because as Zanelle and I were doing this, we had a philosophical dispute. I am a data-driven guy. You can't give me enough information, and I'm a giver. I want to vomit all that information right back out to you. We were talking inappropriately during the previous session about how to present things when you're doing virtual learning. Somehow, Zanelle doesn't think it's appropriate to have a slide filled with words at about 5-point font, very narrow margins, and cramming every word you possibly can and just hitting people with this. Then I had to explain to her that, well, you know, this comes to me naturally. My middle name is War and Peace, but it's a long story. I won't tell you about it. Okay, that's hopefully the last bad joke here. She doesn't want me to use that one. However, you have this information, you've done this review, and now you're breaking into subcommittees. What are you going to do with all this? Because if one person tries to do it, I promise you, this is not going to happen. And for obsessive compulsive, anal retentive people like me, that's a bit of a stretch. It's like, I can do this. You're darn stretch I can do this. And if given all the time in the universe, kind of like those monkeys in Shakespeare, perhaps I could get this done, but not in any meaningful capacity. So you want to get those subcommittees going, and what that does is not only does it allow the work to get done, it buys involvement. It gets different perspectives in there. So you get someone from a clerking standpoint, someone from court reporting, someone else who handles a different aspect of records, and you get those folks together, they're talking, they get some ideas, and they bring it back. Does that mean they have the final word? No, it's going to go up through the chain, but you get that information coming forward. And it gives people an opportunity to participate. Because if I'm just sitting there on the sidelines going, wonder what those eggheads are doing up there. I see they go to an awful lot of lunches, but other than eating on our dime and us not getting raises, I'm not seeing a whole heck of a lot come from the strategic planning process. Well, this gets those people an opportunity to participate. And now you can start looking at goals. What are those goals? I like to say there aren't any bad ideas, but like using that War and Peace joke, there could be bad ideas. However, you get this information out and you work through that. Where are you going to go from there? And you start winnowing these things down. What is possible? What is preferable? What is doable? And what should we just shelf for the moment? And then pick a few strategies for each goal. You've identified those goals for a reason, but without strategies, you're not going to be able to accomplish this. And I offer an example. I like to do endurance activities because, well, apparently I'm a glutton for punishment. However, I have a training log that I follow almost religiously. My wife will tease me about this. Oh, what does your Bible say today? Well, it says I'm going to do X. It means you're not going to see me for the next 2 or 3 hours. But then I have a training log, so I get to vomit everything from the training that I've done into this log, and then I go back and review this, so I'm a really exciting guy. If you doubted about the anal retentive part, I've got it covered here, people. But you want to develop those goals, and I mentioned the training because that provides me a means to achieve the goals that I want to achieve. By doing X, as opposed to going, man, it's a gorgeous day out there today. I'm going to go out, run 20 miles, ride 100 miles, and maybe I'll jump in the lake because it's right here, and I'll swim a couple miles. Well, I guess that's possible. It probably isn't a sustainable level of effort, and you guys would all have avoided the burden of listening to me talk because I'd still be out there exercising, and Zanelle would be wondering, where is that knucklehead? So, you need strategies, but you need the goal, and they're going to develop one another. So, what about, how are you going to achieve those goals? How are you going to achieve those strategies? Well, now you get objectives. And since we're doing that downward dog, It's important that you be flexible as you try to do these things, because not one path is always going to work. So you're going to encounter things, I don't know, something crazy like maybe a pandemic, or in an earlier session today, I heard that various parts of this country have very realistic and recurring problems with flooding. It was like, dang, hadn't thought about that. I mean, it's something you see on the news periodically, but as part of my continuity of operations programming in the courts I've worked in, that has not been an issue I've had to address. But if it's there, well, darn it, you better put it in there and see how you're going to address it. And if it's going to happen, you better be flexible, because when that comes, unless you're Noah, you're going to need a plan. So look for this, and as you go forward, be prepared to celebrate your small victories. You've made progress on something. Maybe you didn't achieve the whole thing during the first 3 to 5 years of your program. But watch it, and what can you do? And keep measuring that data as it goes forward so you can twist and tweak this thing. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you guys saw, but this session is a little bit different from a lot of them. Most of them are about 75 minutes. This one's 175 minutes, so dig in deep and just enjoy, because it's going to be a little while yet. So get approval, which is always one of those fun things. Because you take these things, and judges, every now and again, aren't real keen about what you're thinking about. It's like, so you get them involved. So make sure you do that type of a review. And pity her.
So now you have to go into where you got your plan done. It looks all good. You got the pictures you want to include. You got the strategies, you got the goals. Now you got to figure out how to operationalize this. Our lesson learned was the best way to operationalize it. You need a judge, a champion judge, and you need a court administrator or someone from the administrative branch to carry forth that. The judge usually is there in case the person reaches an impasse or a barrier. They can help address and move that out the way. The judge is also there because it gives that legitimacy for the organization that, there's this buy-in from top to bottom. And the administrator is there because we know how to get things done. It's just that simple. We know how to get things done. If there's a meeting that needs to occur, we'll make sure the meeting is scheduled. If there's something that needs to be purchased or ordered or this or that done, we take care of that piece. But you have to operationalize it. And you have to have some type of check-in points as you're doing this. Otherwise, you got a plan, you're going off and you're doing your own thing and nobody else knows what you're doing. And you want to make sure everybody knows what you're doing, and they can keep track of it. So you're reporting out to it. Without operationalizing your plan, your strategic plan isn't worth much. It's just worth the paper that it's printed on, and you can use it for PR, but people know that you really aren't doing anything, so it's not instilling the trust from the public, it's not instilling the engagement from the staff. The coordinator, like I said, we used a judge and we used an administrator. We paired them together because of the skill set, and we were able to get things done. And it also opened the door, because remember, our teams went throughout our organizations. It opened the door for our judges to have a relationship with our file room clerks. And so that gave them a whole different feeling of purpose to their job. You're not just hired here to stay in the basement to pull a file. No, what you say matters. And we asked that when there were team meetings that the judge moved back from, well, we'll say, not be the one who rushes to the table and say, hey, this is what we should be doing. Because once the judge says that, everybody sort of agrees, yes, this is what we should be doing. Let's make it look the way the judge says. But judge, if you reserve that, put it on the back burner for a minute and let the clerk talk, they can tell you what's really going on. And then let the supervisor talk, and then let the other person talk. Then we'll end up with hearing all of these voices and the best possible solution at all. At our last in-person strategic plan meeting, which I believe was 2019, I don't think we got one in 2020, where we were doing the check-in. Our chief judge told everybody in the room, I don't care what your title is, the best idea wins. And using that type of framework, that gave people courage to put their idea on the table, because it wasn't like your idea was going to be valued any less than it would be if it was coming from a judge. We have our teams. Our teams have their plans for the year. They've taken those plans and they broke them down. Well, this is what you can expect from this team this quarter, the next quarter, the next quarter. They submit the quarterly reports. We all get back together. Everybody reports out. Then we get to see what's working, what's not working, and determine what's the next move. Some things had to be scrapped. When COVID came, everything was on pause. After COVID, we had in our strategic plan, one judge is going to pilot using this new thing called Zoom. She started on February. By March 16th, every judge is going to have Zoom in their courtroom. So you had to change it. So you get to say this is what you're planning, but you don't have the opportunity to control everything. And so you're going to move in and out and figure out what's the best way to have everything happen. I believe one of the most important things on this slide is about empowering and not micromanaging. You put this together for a reason. You wanted to create a pathway forward for the court. That means you wanted to hear from the various voices in the courts, and we did it through focus groups, surveys. You wanted to hear from your stakeholders. And once you got all that information together, you wanted to do something powerful with it to create what's the plan for this court. And you have 20 different projects going on simultaneously. Don't micromanage it because there's no way possible to micromanage it. And because you do not have the level of expertise to insert yourself in every one of those venues. So you got good people on the bus, they say, let them go ahead and drive. As I stated, we do a review. We hired an outside consultant because in courts we're busy. I don't know what Richie does in his office where he can put his feet on his desk. I never can. So we hired an outside person who could sort of keep us on track. And when we fell off track, when we were derailed because of COVID and trying to figure out whatever, she says, what are you going to do with your strategic plan? And we talked about it, and we said, we're going to put our next meeting on pause. We're supposed to have a quarterly meeting. Let's put that on pause. But however, we really need to accelerate this one judge who was going to do Zoom to start making it a court-wide process. And so she helped us cultivate what would that look like? What does that idea actually look like? We also had a group, one department that was going to pilot, let's have a adjustable work schedule and work from home, and you'll keep data and statistics. The study that we were talking about in other sessions. And it was like, okay, so we need to have a multitude of people all of a sudden working from home. What does that look like? And what services do we need to provide remotely that we haven't even thought about previously? So that's what we ended up doing instead of having, let's gather together and talk about, how's your program and your team doing? How's your project progressing? We had to actually sort of put a lot of it on pause and focus on two main things. During that time, our strategic plan has expired that was on the shelf. So now we're getting ready to face a new change in leadership. We have a new chief judge coming in 2023. That chief judge, her main thing when she comes in, she's looking for a strategic plan. So she can have an outline. What does this court operation look like? What are the broad things that we want to accomplish? And we'll be able to do that. I don't know if we'll be doing it virtually or in person, but we will be able to do that. So our lessons learned, you want buy-in, leadership downward. Know that you're going to invest some time and some resources. And those were the best practices. And then the biggest lesson learned is that the best plans, the best plans of mice and men, best laid plans, sometimes you don't have any control over it. You got to go with it. So I think we are out of time. If you have questions or anything, we'll be up here to answer them. And thank you for your time.